Dear Secretary General, dear Director, Dr. Stivelberg, Mr. Vino, dear delegates and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here today, and I should add thank you for still being awake, for those of you who are still alive. I know it can be difficult. It hasn't been too long since I was on the other side of this room. I still very much and very often am on the other side of rooms such as this one, and I will try to keep that in mind and try not to do too lousy a job at making sure you are awake by the end of my talk. So, as previously said, I am an economist at the OECD in the Directorate for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs. So we are the guys that deal with the analysis of the labor market, the analysis of jobs. And what I'm going to argue today is that in order to understand what is happening to the political climate worldwide and to many of the debates that you have been having in this very conference, it's absolutely essential to understand what's happening to jobs, what's happening to the labor market. And this is because jobs are a big part of our life. Jobs is what we get our resources from. Jobs is what occupies much of our lives. Jobs is what defines our life in many ways. And I don't need to convince you that people who are upset about their jobs, who are upset about their labor market status, are also people who are going to be in a state of rejection when it comes to dealing with the global order of affairs, when it comes to trusting institutions, when it comes to voting, to choose who to vote for. In our work, what we try to do is to understand, in particular, how a number of what we call megatrends, some big economic forces that are driving change in the labor market, are affecting jobs. And in particular, we focus on two elements that I'm going to talk about today. How technology is changing jobs, and how globalization is changing jobs. Why these two? Well, you don't need to look far to understand why these are important. Look at whatever political campaign you have seen in the last few years, and you're typically going to find that politicians tend to blame two forces for the struggle that their people are going through when it comes to the job market. It's either machines that are taking jobs, or it's cheap labor elsewhere that is taking jobs, or immigration, which is another form of cheap labor coming from elsewhere. To some extent, you could say these factors have always been there. The economy is in constant change. We witness other transformations like they're going on today. So why is this time different? Well, I'm going to argue it's different because these forces for the last decades have been eating away much of the pie that belonged to the middle class. It belonged to the core of society that has historically constituted the backbone of advanced economies. We're not talking about marginalized groups. We're talking about the very center of society that is being affected and that has swung different ways and has given rise to all sorts of new political actors around the world. And allow me to say, it has also made the international confrontation a lot more tense. Now, let's get to some facts. Let's get some facts straight. And this is the part where I want to be awake for, so give me 5 more minutes, then you can sleep for the rest. Question number 1. Which one of these two forces, technology and globalization, robots and migrants, machines and cheap labor, is most strongly correlated with the transformations of the labor market and the losses of jobs that many people are worried about? And this is piece number 1 of the analysis that we have been carrying out at the OECD that I would like to share with you, and the answer is technology. It's technology that is most closely correlated with the loss of jobs, in particular with the loss of jobs in the middle of the skill distribution, manufacturing jobs that typically constituted the backbone of middle-class families that I've been talking about. And it's not, albeit with some caveats, globalization per se. What does this mean? Well, there is a very strong political message out of this. It's not by building walls, it's not by raising tariffs, it's not by closing to the outer world that you're going to bring jobs back. Because many of those jobs may have just been automated away, may have just been lost because of machines. They've just been lost because of a technological revolution that requires new skills and new competencies, and it's fanciful to believe that if you close to the outer world, you're going to go back 50 years in time, and you're going to go back to a state of development that does not exist anymore. That's message number one. Message number two, which I will call the $1 million question, can be phrased as follows. If technology is so disruptive, are we all going to be unemployed because robots are going to do all of our work? You might have seen some very catastrophistic estimates of the numbers of jobs at risk of automation. There's a very famous paper that has come out of Oxford University that says that 47% of jobs in the US that are at risk of being automated away in the next couple of decades. Well, allow me to say that what comes out of our analysis of this point is something that looks a lot less catastrophic than that. By redoing the same analysis, the OECD comes out with numbers that are a lot smaller. We come out with about 14% of jobs at risk of automation. But that is not necessarily a number that I want you to retain. There's a more general point here. Thinking that technological unemployment, the fact that we're going to be out of jobs and without anything to do, because machines are going to do our jobs for us, goes simply against history. It's happened before. Think about agriculture. Most of our workers used to be in the agricultural sectors. These days, in advanced society, who do you know that works in agriculture? How many of the people you know in your surroundings? Very few. Few percentage points of the labor force is in agriculture. Is this time different? Is it happening faster? Maybe. We don't have the crystal ball. So, of course, put a grain of salt. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But 50% of the labor market in 2 decades is a large number. Why did I say I don't want you to retain the figure per se? Because I think there's a more powerful message here. There's probably a big caveat to be put on all of this analysis. The problem is not that jobs are going to disappear altogether. The problem is that jobs are changing. People will have a job. I am pretty convinced of that. But people are going to need very different skills than the ones they're using today. And these skills are probably going to need to change at a faster pace than they were changing before. People need to be more ready to change what they do. And here comes the role of policy making. And if I can summarize in 3 words how what policymakers should be focusing on when it comes to understanding how to help people to cope with these transformations, the answer is skills, skills, skills. I'm not saying this just because I'm at Sciences Po and I'm hoping to be invited again, of course. It's true. Education and training is the most important policy lever that we can use to make people better equipped for the future. But let me add something that will make this statement a bit less grossly obvious than what it sounded like as I just said it. It's got to be education throughout your lives. Your students, and now I'm going to scare you. I know that a lot of you are really looking forward to the day when you don't have to sit in this kind of lectures anymore. And you will be done with your education, you will be going out of the world, you will have a job, and forget school. Well, here's the news. That's probably not going to happen. The generation I have in front of me, our generation, I think the generation of people who are also older than us, is going to be a generation that finally has to embrace the idea of lifelong learning. The best I can wish to all of you is that you're going to be on a lifetime trajectory of learning that will allow you to change your skills, to adapt your skills, to adapt yourselves to whatever the needs of the future might be. And that is the core of the issue. It's not to predict whether 20% of jobs, 40% of jobs, or what percentage of jobs will be disappear. Some jobs will disappear. It's the nature of how the economy works. But we need to understand how we make people better equipped to cope with these changes. And in concluding my intervention, I therefore want to stress that we are not on a ship that is set on a trajectory, on a course that cannot be changed. Some of the forces I've described, yes, they're very powerful, they're difficult to deal with. Single individuals may not be able to fight them off, single countries may not be able to fight them off. But there is a big role for policymaking to steer the ship that we are on. And this is why it's very important that people like you looking ahead will keep in mind that it's necessary to reflect upon these lessons and to remain as much engaged in the debate with an open mind and with a conscience that is very much grounded in the idea that change can be achieved. Thank you.